Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. As you can see, we have rebranded once again. Going to a more fitting name for the content we want to produce going forward with the channel. If this is your first time here, welcome friend. Please take a moment and hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps out the channel. Thank you all so much. Now, let's get on with the video. Tonight, I invite you to take a journey with me into the shadows of history, to a place where the walls themselves seem to whisper tales of sorrow and despair. Our destination is the infamous Rolling Hills Asylum, located in a small, unassuming town of East Bethany, New York. But do not be deceived by the quaint setting, for within this foreboding structure lies a chilling past that continues to haunt the present. The story of Rolling Hills Asylum begins in the year 1827, when the Genesee County Poorhouse was established. It was a facility designed to provide refuge for the impoverished, the mentally ill, the orphaned, and the elderly who had nowhere else to turn. However, what was intended as a sanctuary quickly became a place of unimaginable suffering. As you walk through the dimly lit halls, it's easy to imagine the countless souls who passed through these doors. The poorhouse was a last resort for many, a place where hope was often extinguished upon entry. Families were torn apart, with men, women, and children all confined within the same dismal walls. Conditions were harsh, and the line between care and neglect was often blurred. Disease was rampant, and death was a frequent visitor. In the mid-1800s, the poorhouse was expanded and renamed the Genesee County Infirmary. While the name changed, the grim reality remained. The building became a dumping ground for society's unwanted, and those deemed unfit for the outside world were hidden away, out of sight and out of mind. The infirmary housed the insane, the sick, and the destitute, all crammed together in a labyrinth of despair. The treatment of the mentally ill in the 19th and early 20th centuries was nothing short of barbaric. Patients were subjected to primitive and often brutal methods in the name of medicine. Electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and isolation were commonplace. Imagine the screams echoing through the hallways, the cries for help that went unanswered. Those who survived were left broken, their minds shattered, their spirits crushed. But perhaps the darkest chapter in the history of Rolling Hills Asylum is the tale of the solitary confinement cells. Deep within the bowels of the building, these tiny, windowless rooms were used to punish and control the most unruly inmates. Deprived of light and human contact, many went mad within these walls. It's said that if you listen closely, you can still hear the tormented wails of those who were left to rot in the darkness. As the years passed, the infirmary became a place of death. Records show that over 1,700 people died within these walls, though the true number may be much higher. The dead were often buried in unmarked graves on the asylum's grounds, their identities lost to time. The sheer volume of death has left an indelible mark on the building, and many believe that the restless spirits of the departed still linger. The poorhouse and infirmary evolved over the decades, and by the 1930s, it had become known as the Genesee County Nursing Home. Despite this seemingly benign designation, the suffering continued. The elderly and infirm were often left to languish, receiving minimal care in their final days. The building's walls absorbed the anguish of countless souls, adding layers of despair to its already grim history. Let us delve deeper into the tragic stories of some of the individuals who lived and died within these walls. One such tale is that of Emma, a young woman committed to the asylum by her own family. Emma suffered from severe depression, a condition poorly understood at the time. Instead of receiving compassion and proper care, she was subjected to cruel treatments that only worsened her condition. She spent years in isolation, her mind unraveling until she eventually succumbed to her misery. Visitors to the asylum often report feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness in the rooms where Emma once resided, as if her spirit still lingers, trapped in an endless cycle of despair. Another harrowing story is that of John, a Civil War veteran who found himself at the poorhouse after the war. John was plagued by what we now recognize as PTSD, but back then, he was labeled as insane. His fellow residents, unable to understand his violent outbursts and night terrors, shunned him. John spent his final years in the asylum, haunted by the horrors of war and the cruelty of those around him. Some claim to have seen a spectral figure in a tattered uniform wandering the grounds, his eyes filled with a sorrow that transcends time. The treatment of the mentally ill was particularly horrific during the asylum's operation. One particularly gruesome practice was the use of restraints. Patients were often tied down for days, weeks, or even months at a time. Imagine the terror and helplessness of being strapped to a bed, unable to move, your pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. The marks left on the walls by those desperate for freedom are still visible today, silent testimonies to their suffering. The asylum's morgue is another place where the veil between the living and the dead seems particularly thin. The cold, sterile room once held the bodies of those who had perished, awaiting burial in unmarked graves. It is said that the spirits of the deceased still linger here, unable to move on. Paranormal investigators have captured chilling EVP recordings, with voices from beyond the grave whispering messages of torment and unrest. One of the most famous apparitions is that of Roy Krause, a 7-foot-tall man who spent much of his life at Rolling Hills. Afflicted with gigantism, Roy was abandoned by his family and left to live out his days in the asylum. Despite his intimidating stature, Roy was known to be gentle and kind. His spirit is said to roam the halls, a towering figure searching for the family that forsook him. Visitors have reported feeling an icy chill when Roy's spirit is near, as if the air itself mourns his tragic fate. Then there's the spirit of a little girl named Mary. It's believed that Mary died of tuberculosis, a common and deadly disease in the asylum. Visitors have reported seeing her ghostly form, often accompanied by the sound of childish giggles and the patter of tiny feet. Mary is said to be playful, but there's a sadness that clings to her presence, a longing for the life that was stolen from her. Some have seen her holding a doll, her innocent face etched with a sorrow that defies her tender age. The shadow people, those nameless entities that lurk in the periphery of your vision, are perhaps the most unsettling of all. These dark figures are often seen darting through the corridors or standing silently in the corners of rooms. Their intentions are unclear, but their presence is undeniably sinister. Some believe they are the spirits of those who suffered the most horrific fates, their anger and anguish manifesting as malevolent shadows. Rolling Hills Asylum is more than just a haunted house, it is a monument to human suffering, a place where the past refuses to be forgotten. The spirits that dwell here are a testament to the cruelty and neglect endured by countless souls. They are a reminder that even in death, there can be no peace for those who were tormented in life. As we conclude our journey through the haunted halls of Rolling Hills Asylum, I urge you to remember the stories of those who lived and died here. Their pain, their sorrow, and their cries for justice resonate through the ages, a chilling echo that will never fade. So, as you leave this place tonight, be mindful of the shadows that follow you. For the spirits of Rolling Hills Asylum are always watching, always waiting, and always ready to remind us of the darkness that lies within the human heart. Thank you all again for watching. And until next time, stay spooky.